There are countless stories of encounters between humans and animals. Some people have come across wild animals who ended up acting in a way they did not predict. When a little bear cub approaches a man, what happens between them is something that will warm your heart. If you keep watching, you'll get to hear the full story. Looking out for nature. In the woods of eastern Siberia, there was a man who was looking forward to doing some fishing. This man was from a local village, and after seeing how lovely the weather was for a spring day, he headed over to some rivers nearby. Although the man was quite experienced with fishing, and he had perfected his regular technique, on that day he decided to do something a little different. He brought his gear, but he left the float at home, eager to try some fly fishing. Even though the rivers were located within the forests, he managed to find a spot where there weren't many trees. The riverbank was clear and open, ideal for his particular technique. He quickly got to work, throwing his bait into the waters. It didn't take long for him to feel some tension, which meant that there was a fish biting the bait. He caught one trout and plopped it into his net. Repeating those exact moves, the man ended up successfully catching a lot of fish. He was in a jolly mood. However, because he was so absorbed in his activity, the man was completely unaware of other things in his surroundings. Particularly, there was something in the woods watching the man seamlessly catch the fish, one after the other. It turned out to be a little bear cub. After a little while, the bear approached the man. The man didn't notice. The bear was eyeing up the fish, clearly eager to have some. But even as it sat right beside the net, the man was still unaware. Frustrated, the bear let out a small sound. The man was startled. He whipped around and immediately caught sight of the bear by his fishing net. The bear didn't appear to be hostile. If anything, it just looked hungry. He took pity on the small bear. Grabbing the grayling, which was flopping amongst the trout, he handed it over to the cub. The bear was elated at the man's gift, happily munching on its new meal. For some reason, it didn't eat the entire fish. With half of it left, the bear cub took it into its teeth and headed straight back into the forest. The man watched the cub leave before continuing with his fishing. Because it seemed as if the fish were getting sparse around the area he was, he jumped into the water and started fishing from the middle of the riverbank. Once again, he began to catch loads of fish. When the man took a break for a moment, he noticed that the same bear cub who he had fed not too long ago was now in the water, standing beside him. He was confused for a moment as to why it had returned, but then he noticed its gaze. The little bear was looking at his fishing net again. Feeling pity for the bear, the man trudged up and out of the river and picked up a fish from the net. He handed the grayling over to the bear, just like before, and the bear readily took it. For the second time, the bear retreated back into the forest. Curiosity got the best of him, so he decided to follow the bear. Where could it possibly be going? He didn't want to scare the little bear, so the man made sure to keep some distance between them. Suddenly, the cub seemed to disappear into the bushes. Heading into a place that was well hidden, the man crouched down and pushed gently at the bush leaves. It was dark in that area, so the man squinted. Then he finally understood why the cub was taking food to a hidden place. Sprawled out on the forest floor was a large bear. In spite of its size, it appeared to be very weak. As the man looked closer, he noticed that the mama bear was wounded. Not wanting to waste any time, the man went back to his fishing spot, took the fish, and walked back to the hidden spot. He left the fish close to the bears and headed home. After making some calls to the regional hunting department, the bear finally got the help that it needed. I found this story online and I'm not sure if it actually happened. Nevertheless, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Isn't it a relief to hear that everyone in this story got a happy ending? Surprising the divers. David and Alice were a married couple who went on a diving trip in the South Pacific Ocean. In particular, they were enjoying the waters just by the islands of Tonga. David was a professional underwater photographer, and he loved capturing the beauty of the seas. In this trip, he ended up meeting a group of friendly humpback whales. David commented on the weather that day, claiming that it was perfect conditions for some photography. It was one of those amazing days in the South Pacific where the water was perfectly flat and there was hardly a breath of wind. As the couple were diving, they saw a group of 3 humpback whales. David and Alice decided to follow them. There was a mother, a male, and a calf. For around an hour, the divers swam around the waters, observing the whales. After some time, the little calf got curious about the divers and approached them. In particular, it went up to Alice. Fortunately, David had his camera out. He had the opportunity of a lifetime to video the interaction between the baby humpback and his wife. In the footage and in some pictures, the calf can be seen twirling around in the waters, clearly in a very good mood. The whales are often as curious as we are of them, David explained, which can make for some really amazing moments underwater. If you get the chance to see some majestic creatures in the water, would you do what this couple did and follow them? It was a decision that most definitely paid off for David and Alice. Swan on a subway. When a girl decided to go somewhere to celebrate her birthday, one thing she definitely did not expect was this rare encounter with a swan. Ariel Cordova Rojas visited the Jamaican Bay Wildlife Refuge for her 30th birthday. She was enjoying her time there, but then she noticed that in the grass there was a swan. The swan was sitting alone. Ariel was curious about it. Why was it just sitting there? However, after looking a little closer, she noticed that the swan wasn't moving at all. It didn't seem to be able to walk nor fly, and so Ariel chose to help it. She went up to the swan and picked it up, wrapping the bird in her jacket in order to keep it warm and protected. The entrance of the refuge was a mile away from their location, but Ariel didn't mind. She walked there with the swan in her arms. Once she got to the entrance, she met with some people who were happy to drive her and the swan to the nearest subway station. Because Ariel was a cyclist, they also brought her bike with them. It was a strange sight for any onlookers. A lady sat on the subway train with a swan for about 10 stops. Finally, the pair arrived at Nostrand Avenue, where someone working at the Wild Bird Fund came and met them. This employee worked at a wildlife rehabilitation center, so they took the swan there. After having a look at the swan, the center realized what the problem was. It had a fungal infection that had affected its mobility. However, the swan's appearance looked fine, and it took a careful eye to notice that something was amiss. Ariel had something to say about the whole thing. Even though we live in a concrete jungle, we are surrounded by nature and wildlife if you just take a second to look around. The director of the Wild Bird Fund commented on the situation, saying that the swan was safe and now had a nice big cage and a buddy, another swan, to keep her company. Thank goodness that the swan met Ariel when it did. Even though it was her birthday, Ariel spent the day going out of her way to do something nice for someone else. In this case, it was a bird. Nursed back to health. In a Siberian city, there was a boy who would visit his grandmother during the summer. During one of these summers, the 12-year-old boy ended up making a new friend, one that is far from conventional. Just like Ariel in the last story you heard, this story is about the strange friendship that formed between a human and a wild bird. It was time for the summer holidays, so Vadim Velogurov was staying at his grandmother's house in Minusik. One day he went outside and stumbled across something unexpected. He found a little bird at the back of the house. It was a female bird, and it was just a baby. As soon as he laid eyes on it, Vadim knew that he couldn't leave it by itself. It was defenseless and very young. It looked as if it had been abandoned. So he decided to take the bird in and be its caretaker, at least for the meantime. He made sure to keep the little sparrow safe inside, feeding it whenever it was hungry. The bird was happily responsive to Valdim's kindness. He decided to name the bird Abi. However, Vadim knew that wild animals belonged in the wild, and it didn't feel right for him to hold on to the bird. He accepted that he would have to let Abi go soon. That day finally came because the bird was in full health and could confidently fly. So Vadim tried to encourage little Abi to fly away, to be free. In a surprising turn of events, it turned out that Abi didn't want to leave Valdim's side. After all that care, Abi has grown used to feeding from Valdim's hand and sitting on his shoulder. Vadim now has plans after the summer. He wants to bring the wild bird back to his hometown. Who knew that an accidental meeting would lead to such a precious friendship? These stories show that even wild animals have the potential to be very friendly creatures. I hope you enjoyed hearing about these sweet encounters. If you found this video interesting, be sure to hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you again in the next video.